be unscathed through these 3 weeks. They're going to lose one of these games. I think the Mississippi State game will be the easier of the two to get. However, I think that going to Ole Miss in week 5, being, polar opposite teams than Ole Miss and Mississippi State. I feel like Mississippi State is going to push the pace, make LSU have to play that pass defense. They're going to not really take advantage of LSU's weak spot in the run game, but what they're going to do is they're more than likely going to test that DB room. LSU got roughly 4 solid transfers in the cornerback room, which was much needed because that was a sore spot last season. Guys like J.K. Johnson, Deuce Chestnut, Denver Harris, even Zy Alexander, these guys are pretty sought-after cornerbacks who have great experience, who are going to be able to add in those little moments of that air raid that'll probably be the most important points in the game. You're going to have about 2 or 3 plays that are really going to determine what happens between LSU and Mississippi State. Will Rogers might test them. Will Rogers might succeed. If Will Rogers can throw for over 330 yards in this game and he really makes a fool out of LSU's new DB room, it could be the learning moment that the Tigers need. Now, a Tigers loss doesn't necessarily mean they're doomed and that they're behind schedule or that they're a failure compared to last season. I just think that a Mississippi State win would kind of serve the same purpose as a Florida State win last season. It'll wake them up early and it'll prevent them from losing another easy game down the road. Moving on to the Arkansas game, it's another one of those similar situations where we saw these two guys battle it out last year. Yeah, LSU had the rumors of a flu game. We heard Harold Perkins was throwing up before the team meal. We heard he had his flu game like MJ, but I'm just not sure if that's exactly what went wrong with Arkansas and LSU. Sure, it was a cold game as well. It's away. It's early, and LSU doesn't historically play well in early slot games. But I'm just not ready to write off the Arkansas Razorbacks just yet. They got a pretty talented quarterback in KJ Jefferson. I believe that what Arkansas did to Ole Miss after the LSU game was pretty impressive, and it showed everyone like, hey, Arkansas is not here to play fluke football. Last week against LSU was probably their best efforts of the entire season, especially because after the Ole Miss W, they go ahead and lose to Mizzou. So I'm kind of confused on how they're going to go from keeping it close with LSU, absolutely obliterating Ole Miss the following week, and then losing to Mizzou, one of the worst SEC East teams of all time. It's kind of explains why Arkansas is the way they are. 22 recruiting class of the country, ninth transfer class, which is not too bad. But they just got too many teams in the SEC West to compete with. I just don't think these are going to be one of the or that the Arkansas Razorbacks are going to be one of the more well-rounded teams. They got KJ, but they went to triple overtime with Kansas in their bowl game. That level of play shows me like, hey, I don't think y'all are ready. Sure, KJ's banged up, but hey, Jayden Daniels is banged up. We lost the SEC title game, and I didn't hear any excuses for the Tigers, so I'm not going to give any excuses to the Razorbacks. If you're playing your guys, I'm expecting a W. That's all there is to it. Moving on to the next week, I would say the Ole Miss game. We already talked about it a little bit, but we'll dive in a little bit more. That's going to be a little bit of an interesting issue. Of course, we don't know who the quarterback is. They're going in a little bit of a quarterback competition, even though I'm sure Jackson Dart will make his way out of it after his impressive run last year. Walker Howard is added in the mix, even though I think his chances are slim to none. And Spencer Sanders is in here as well. I don't think that Walker Howard going to Ole Miss was the best spot for him because now he's placed in this predicament where he's still sitting. He's still waiting for room to get freed up, and he's quite frankly still waiting for his time. At LSU, you see pretty much, you see it written already with Nussmeier taking the starting job from Daniels after Daniels will leave. But with Ricky Collins and Colin Hurley coming in, you could kind of see that Walker Howard felt the heat. These two quarterbacks that LSU just signed are great kids, great talent, and I think the fact that he wasn't getting the same level of certainty might have played into his decision. Now, him going to Ole Miss doesn't mean he'll never be able to play. Quite frankly, everyone's saying that him going to Ole Miss might ruin his career also should consider the logic that him playing against iron could help sharpen iron. You see guys like Tyrann Mathieu talk about the transfer portal and say, they wanted to sit behind the guys that they enrolled behind, like Patrick Peterson, what have you, because they provide ample opportunities to learn. They give you a lot of lessons and they give you a lot of experiences that they've had at an elite level. When you're able to collaborate with great minds in a sport, it normally pays dividends because now you get a perspective that you probably wouldn't have gained before. So I'm not going to sit here and say Walker Howard isn't going to be able to grow. Quite frankly, I think, it might not even be his last school. Just to see him move on from Ole Miss potentially, especially if, after 1 year at LSU, he'd move on. So I'm not saying, his career is going to be a lot different than what we'd expect, but it's definitely taking a couple interesting turns. Ole Miss's roster though, 12th transfer class in the nation. I think that that's pretty impressive, especially with what Lane Kiffin has been saying. He's saying that he's going to recruit the SIP, come to the SIP, all this stuff. He's making his national campaigns, and this might be his first year to actually show what he can do as the top dog in Mississippi. It seems like Ole Miss is going to be able to take over that spot in a sense where they're going to be one of the top teams in the SEC West. They played around the top 15 in the AP poll for the majority of the first half of the year before that second half crumble. But without that Mississippi State loss to close out the year, everyone would be thinking of the Rebels a lot different. Moving on to the Auburn game, I think this is going to be a pretty good W for LSU. I think that Auburn doesn't really provide anything big besides the fact that there's a new coach. The fact that there's a new coach can mean one of two things. It could be really great, like Brian Kelly, or it could be really bad, like Florida and Billy Napier. Could be a lot of rough instances. However, they do have the third overall transfer portal class in the country. um, it's kind of going to be hard to tell where their ceiling is. You don't really know how these guys are going to gel. You don't really know what the new scheme's going to be. Sure, Robbie Ashford played great, but it's really going to be about how you can communicate the new scheme and how well these kids are going to be able to follow it. If you want to take a dive into that third overall transfer class, they have 11 of those top transfers. Five of them are offensive skill positions. Five of their top 11 transfers are offensive skill positions. That's impressive. Then, out of those top 11, three of them are some of the best offensive linemen that this transfer portal class had to offer. So, eight of those 11 top transfers that they're bringing in are all going to boost that offense exponentially. So, I wouldn't expect the Auburn Tigers to come out to Tiger Stadium and lay an egg. But we all remember what happened last time they came to Death Valley, and I think that revenge is on the mind of LSU this year. Everybody who is playing for this team wants to win. Everybody who's playing for this team doesn't want to leave any stone unturned because they know what happens when you don't push the pace. You know what I mean? Last year, they are having fantastic momentum. They're in the middle of one of the best runs I've seen LSU go on since the national championship, and they ended with the unfortunate game against Texas A&M. Sure, injuries. Sure, the team had a couple of mishaps and a couple of depth issues that they needed to address. But here we are this offseason addressing them. Here we are this offseason learning with the experience. Here we are this offseason adjusting to the new leaders in the room. B.J. Ojolari's gone. Keishon Boutte's gone. Guys like that leave. New guys have to step up. Mekhi Garner, Jay Ward, gone, gone. You have to find new leaders in this room. I think Brian Kelly did that greatly, and I think that the fact that the new leaders will be able to come in might surprise a lot of people because when these new leaders come in, so does an entirely different pace of football. Will that pace of football increase and will it help propel them to the college football playoff? I'd bet. Looking at Auburn as a whole, I'd bet that LSU's going to walk out of there with a W, but unfortunately, they're going to play another team from Alabama right around that time. Before the Auburn game, LSU is going to get that Mizzou dub without a shadow of a doubt. Then in between Auburn and Bama, they're going to play Army at home, and I believe that LSU is going to defeat Army. It's going to be a pretty interesting game to see Army come down to Tiger Stadium. You haven't really got to see, a team like that. It'll be really cool, though. I'm sure they're going to have an awesome, awesome flyover before the game. One would hope. One would hope. Let's bring out a jet. Let's break the sonic barrier above Tiger Stadium. Let's do it for the country. Let's get a USA chant going. USA, USA. Nothing to fire up the boys better than a F-16 fighter jet going over Death Valley. right before the Tigers drop 50 on your head. Then moving into Alabama, everyone is writing Alabama off, and I don't know why, because Alabama has the number one recruiting class, and they're still a powerhouse. Quite frankly, they're still the biggest powerhouse in college football. You don't just go away overnight when you're Nick Saban. Sure, you had a rough year, but Bryce Young just got drafted number one. That still speaks volumes about what the University of Alabama can do for you. Bryce Young came in, did not win a national championship, did win a Heisman, but he didn't even get a ring. And he still got drafted number one. The thing about Nick Saban that makes him so interesting is that all of his recruiting classes, if they stay, leave with a championship ring, a national championship ring. And Bryce Young didn't get those honors, but he still got to climb to the top. That, makes recruits wonder, if Alabama's not going to be able to stay in the top four, the information I can learn and the amount of experience I'll be able to gain at Alabama is still beneficial. They got NFL level coaches. Hell, they have NFL level players. You're going to be playing against the best of the best, and there's merit in that. And I think every recruit still notices it. Let's look at the amount of 5 stars and 4 stars Alabama was able to pull in. Alabama signed 12 5 stars. You want to know how many LSU signed? Three. They signed four more 5 stars than we did this offseason. You want to know how many 4 stars they had? Alabama signed 15 4 stars. That is equivalent to LSU's 15 that they signed. LSU got up to the number 6 recruiting class because they did a great job at bringing in 4 stars, and it's a great recruiting class. Not going to knock the Tigers. They did a phenomenal job, and they recruited their state really, really well. They're probably one of the better SEC teams at combating a Nick Saban recruiting trail. However, interesting little tidbit of information. Now that Alabama loses their quarterback and has to gain another one, Nick Saban went and scratched his head a little bit. Where do I go? Who do I pick? He went ahead and looked. Notre Dame's quarterback stuck out to him for a multitude of reasons, I'd assume. One being the fact that he did lose his starting job due to injury, and hypothetically, Notre Dame may be reluctant to start him going forward because of this, similar success they saw with their backup. So I'm thinking that he was on the way out, looking for a new squad. Nick Saban got curious, thinking, well, he might have some information on a potential Brian Kelly scheme. He might, he was really young when Kelly was there, but who knows? That's a pretty interesting avenue to go down if Brian Kelly was able to, get through to Tyler enough. He might be able to give Nick Saban enough information to help them avenge their loss last year. The loss to LSU proves to me that this rivalry isn't over. LSU and Alabama's rivalry is just as good as ever. LSU's still going to be able to compete hard against Bama. And as far as I know, Brian Kelly's undefeated against Nick Saban right now in the SEC as an SEC head coach. So it's going to be a pretty good game. But the fact that it's in Alabama is so gut wrenching. I just don't know if we're going to be able to pull that one out in Tuscaloosa. And unfortunately, that's probably going to be our second loss of the year behind one of the Mississippi losses. I'm thinking that we're going to lose to Ole Miss. We're going to lose to Alabama. But there's more in store. Moving on to Florida. They lost Anthony Richardson, had a rough year under Billy Napier, going under 500 in his first season. As we mentioned earlier, there was a lot of first-year coaches last season. A lot. Lincoln Riley, Sonny Dykes, Brian Kelly, Billy Napier, and I would say out of that list, the worst and the most clear worst was Billy Napier. He went 6-7, and his recruiting class is a complete reflection of what last season was. 14th overall recruiting class, 16th overall transfer class. If you're in the SEC West, if you need to make a big move, and if you need to show that you can compete with recruiters such as Brian Kelly, Nick Saban, Lane Kiffin, Jimbo Fisher, and Hugh Freeze, you got to show up, and you got to show up now. Brian Kelly came in and didn't miss a beat. Jimbo Fisher last season brings in the number one recruiting class. It doesn't matter who you are in the SEC. Everyone can recruit. So the fact that Billy Napier goes from UL and comes here and doesn't see success right away shouldn't worry people in a sense where, oh, Billy's not going to be able to succeed, rather than he's not going to be able to succeed as quickly as we thought. I think that Billy Napier, he's still a great coach. He just needs a couple years to figure out this scheme. Not everyone's going to be able to go and hit the ground running in year one, take it all home, and put on for the city and go to the Natty like TCU did. However, bringing up Jimbo Fisher, bringing up A&M, bringing up that number one recruiting class of 2022. What happened? What happened to that? How do you get the number one recruiting class over Alabama and finish 5-7? Six of those seven losses coming consecutively. A six-game losing streak for Jimbo Fisher and those Aggies. That's worrisome. They're 15th in recruiting this season after just going number one. 37th in transfer classes for A&M. It just can't get worse for the Aggies. They had their backs against the wall in that game against LSU to close out the regular season. I know everyone's going to hit the comments. Oh, but the Aggies still beat LSU. Sure, but we returned the favorite a year prior. You know what I'm saying? Coach O's final game. We were not ranked. They were ranked, and we're sitting here dying to get to 500 to have some bowl contention. They came to Tiger Stadium last second. Jeray Jenkins in the end zone for Max Johnson. Get out of here. W. You know what's going to happen when A&M comes back to Tiger Stadium? Same thing, but worse. Not even going to need to be a last second W. I don't think A&M is going to be able to hang with LSU this year. So let's go ahead and look at the entire schedule in hindsight. Week 1, FSU, W. Week 2, Grambling State, W. Week 3, away at Mississippi State. Going to be tough. I'll say W. Week 4, versus Arkansas at home, W. Week 5, Ole Miss away. Unfortunately, probably going to be our first loss. 3 SEC games in a row, 2 of the 3 being away. Unfortunate. Moving on from that, we're going to have a bounce back game at Mizzou. That's getting crushed. Then we go home. We have a Auburn and Army home stand, back-to-back home games. I think they're going to take both of them. They're going to take both of them in convincing fashion, and they're going to gear up for the Alabama game. It's going to be the most interesting game of all season. It might even be a potential number one and number two matchup. I think that LSU and Alabama it's going to be another heavyweight fight. This rivalry, like I said earlier, it's not going anywhere. They're the best two teams in the SEC West by far, and it will not change for years to come. Unfortunately, I think Alabama might get the better of LSU. In this instance, it's always easier to go with the home team. Momentum feels like it might swing that way, and they just got a little bit more of the odds in their favor. They got the crowd, they got the comfort, they might have the consistency. We'll have to just see how it plays out. But if I'm going to have to guess, that week would probably house our second loss. Moving into the following weeks, we're going to have a 3-game homestand. Florida Gators, Georgia State, Texas A&M. Dub, dub, dub. 10-2 for LSU in 2023 is my gut feeling. I mean, we came last summer, did our predictions, said 9-3. Couldn't predict the 3 losses exactly, but we did hit the nail on the head on the regular season record at 9-3, and something's telling me, that same gut is telling me that we're going to go 10-2 this year. Look, some things may happen that we would not have expected, but that's football. You got to be able to prepare for that. You got to be able to have the next man up attitude, and you got to be able to increase that depth. Brian Kelly preaches that all the time. He preaches the little things. He preaches consistency, and all of those are going to amount to LSU making the top 4 more than likely. I think, moving into 2024 and the years after, when it's a 12-man playoff race, LSU will be locked in permanently. They're going to be in the playoffs every single bracket at that point. Another team that I want to point out, though, that of course no one's going to forget. How can you forget the back-to-back national champions, the Georgia Bulldogs? They lose Stetson Bennett, but in college football, losing your starter quarterback doesn't always guarantee failure. You know what I mean? College is one of those interesting sports where the team is able to carry on without their best player and still look like they haven't missed a beat. You don't really see that in the NFL. I can guarantee you the Green Bay Packers are going to have mucho trouble next season without A-Rod. New Orleans Saints, unfortunately, have had years of trouble without Drew Brees. I'm thinking that the NCAA doesn't have that same effect, maybe because of the transfer portal. But even years prior, before the transfer portal, you still saw colleges able to have that next man up mentality. Maybe it's because of the game of college isn't as full speed as the pros. Not everyone's elite athletes, championship bred. Not everyone's ready to go claim a Super Bowl. There are some kinks that you can iron out, and some teams are easier to beat than others. So guys like Georgia, who play in the SEC East, who don't have that SEC West schedule, they might be able to get the easy breezy undefeated seasons. But you still got to give the respect to Kirby Smart. He's pulling in the second recruiting class in the country. That returning production for Georgia, it's going to be interesting to see. You can't put all these people in the NFL, almost specifically the Philadelphia Eagles, but you can't put all these people in the NFL and not have me respect you. You're doing something right if people are drafting you left, right, and center. Let's take a look at the LSU spring game real quick. We got some highlights from the spring game that y'all can go ahead and take a look at while I overlap what I saw. First off, it was pretty hot. So I feel like, the whole game just felt like it went by in a blink of an eye. I felt like I was sweating so much that I wasn't able to even focus as hard as I should have. But wide receivers look great. Kyron Lacy, I think, is going to be the guy that I got to give the flowers to the most right here. Kyron Lacy stepped up big after last year, and I must say, I didn't even think he had a bad year. He had a couple of passes that, he should have caught. But that happens at wide receiver. That happens when you're playing one of the toughest positions against some of the toughest people in the toughest conference. I think the fact that he was able to hit the weight room and keep filling out that big frame that he's going to be able to match with Malik Neighbors, it's going to cause trouble for the SEC. Brian Thomas is going to be a great addition. Aaron Anderson is a great addition for the wide receivers. I think that all of these guys getting bigger roles, getting more minutes, are going to be very positive changes for LSU's wide receiver room. Losing Kayshawn Boutte is tough. Losing surefire hands like Mr. Reliable and Jeray Jenkins is tough. But look towards the future. Look towards what we got. The second, or the I guess the runner-up in terms of leader for the SEC in receiving yards was Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors had a fantastic season catching the football, holding the second place in the SEC in receiving yards. Man, that's phenomenal, especially when people didn't think that Malik Neighbors was even wide receiver one from the jump. Everyone gave it to Kayshawn Boutte, and Malik was still able to go out, show his role, and show his true colors. So don't be surprised if another wide receiver does that this season. It's always the guys you least expect. I think that big one-handed catch Kyron Lacy was able to put on the spring game turned a lot of heads. It got, within the first 2 hours on SEC Network, like 50,000 likes on Instagram. Kyron Lacy turned everyone's head with that one. I probably screamed as loud as I possibly could whenever I saw him grab that. I was excited for him to be able to just show everybody, like, hey, I'm here. Wearing the number 2, just like your boy Jay Jettas. Um, Speaking of Kayshawn Boutte, let's talk about him getting drafted. First off, I was thrilled when I saw he got selected. That's always exciting to see guys from LSU carry on the NFLSU legacy and especially the wide receiver U torch. This man's going to go represent one of the best colleges that put out some of the best wide receivers. And I don't even have to name them because everybody already is envisioning at least 5 of those 10. Kayshawn Boutte going to the Patriots, big shocker. Not a lot of people thought that he'd be, fit in the Patriot way. But when you saw Bill Belichick travel to Baton Rouge for his first pro day ever at LSU, made everybody wonder, is he there for Jayden Daniels? Is he there for a DB? Is he there for Kayshawn? Who's he there for? What is Bill Belichick doing? You even had some people point out that he hasn't, even contacted people with scouts or with assistants for an LSU pro day since Nick Saban. So for him to come in person and talk to Brian Kelly for well over an hour speaks levels to what he thinks about Brian and how he respects him, and all in all, what Brian Kelly means to football. Because these are two of the best coaches of all time. These are two of the most successful coaches, and I think them being buddies and them, showing that respect was pretty interesting to see. Moving away from LSU football, we got the NBA Conference Finals. Interesting group of teams playing. Heat versus Celtics. A lot of people will be wondering, how are the Miami Heat even in this situation to be playing for an NBA Finals appearance? You're going to read some concerning stats here. I would say the first concerning stat would be that Boston is 30-9 at home. They've played almost 40 times in the Garden right here, right now, and they've won over 30 of them. So them going over 75% win rate, pretty impressive. I think that, that speaks levels as to what they're probably going to be able to do with home court advantage in this postseason. If you're at home, you're more than likely going to be the team that the odds makers are going to say getting the W. And tonight, the odds makers are saying the Celtics are going to get the W. Boston money line is being taken by 67% of FanDuel bettors. The under, set at 213, being taken by 88%. Spread at 8.5, and 80% of the FanDuel bettors are taking the Heat to cover. That's not a big red flag because 8-5 is a pretty big game. That's just saying they're thinking it'll be competitive. And them saying it'll be under 213 is also them alluding to it being competitive. Boston ranked 4 in the NBA in points, 7 in the NBA in rebounds, and first in the NBA in point differential. Miami ranked 30th in points, 27th in rebounds, 21st in point differential. These two teams are out of each other's leagues. Jimmy Butler is willing the Miami Heat down the stretch. It's very reminiscent of his times in Chicago, very reminiscent of another shooting guard's time in Chicago. I think Jimmy has the power to take the Miami Heat to the finals. I mean, he did it in the bubble against the Lakers. I wouldn't be surprised if he can do it again. I mean, how interesting would it be if we have a Lakers and Miami Heat rematch, even though they're the two underdogs? I think Boston's more than likely going to take game one, more than likely going to take the series. And Jimmy Butler probably going to go another year without getting a ring, which is unfortunate because a lot of these NBA players don't have rings that you'd want to have a ring. Guys like Melo, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Chris Paul. We got a lot of guys that you want to win a championship that you watch growing up that didn't get to do it, that might end up going down the same route as a Charles Barkley, Allen Iverson, Steve Nash, getting close, but not close enough. James Harden's free agency rumors heading back to Houston, my favorite NBA team. I would be overjoyed. Thankfully, never burned or broke a single James Harden jersey, so I wouldn't have to replenish my stock. I would be pushing for that James Harden deal. He can join LSU alumni Darius Days and Tyree Eason in the five uh, other major big men we have on the roster that are almost 7 foot tall and can all combine for a whopping 5 rebounds. A lot of things are going to have to change in Houston if we want to see some success like we saw. 8 years in a row, we went to the playoffs with James Harden. I don't know if we'd be able to go to the playoffs with James Harden after, what we've been seeing. 3 years in a row, having favored number one overall odds. I don't know how that's going to go for Houston. Go ahead and follow the Verdin Verdict on social media. We got the links in the description. We'll post different clips on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram. Pretty much anywhere you get your sports news, we're there. We're giving you the utmost excellent content. It's, you know, probably gonna be the best stuff that you could ask for if you're looking for LSU football news, if I had to say so myself. So go ahead and give us a follow on there. Go ahead and hit the post notification so you never miss another stream. We'll be trying to do this every week, bring back the live streams. It's been a while since we did it. Be a friend, tell a friend, let everybody know. Verdin Verdict's back. We're not here to take part either. We're here to take over. Y'all make sure, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.